With Amber, I don't know why anybody needs to give their address. If we have somebody coming up controversial or whatever, and then they became under attack because now people know where they live, I don't know that that's appropriate anyway, honestly, that we do that.
I don't know that it's appropriate either. I would just like to research the question and see if there is a Wyoming statute or something else in place that requires it, and if council wants us to do that, I'm happy to do it.
Yes, please.
Kyle, if you had something to say, I was going to change the subject.
I was just moving along, yep.
Okay. I mean, on that, I think that's worthy of exploring. I mean, phone books have had people's addresses for ages, but, you know, I'd love to explore what we're what we're required to do and what we're not, and then we can have a discussion after that. But since we, right?
Surprised you know what those are.
Yeah.
Phone book, is that what you said?
The door open. Pop the door open with
Touche.
So, while we're talking about young people, though, I believe we all got an email from Seth, and he had spoken to it once, but while we're on the topic of youth, I do think it's a good point, the fact that our non-discrimination ordinance has been proposed that we're having our third reading on next week. We have defined age to 50 and above, I believe. Seth mentioned the fact that young people also are discriminated against, and I have certainly felt that in this community. For being a young person or somebody that dresses funny or something like that, I definitely felt like I experienced discrimination. Whether it would beyond a reasonable doubt, provable in court, probably not, but still, I think that warrants deliberation on our part. And then we also got an email from another resident that said there were apartment complexes in town that cater to 55 and up. So if they're not letting in folks that are between 50 and 55, would they be in,
Trouble, yeah.
contradiction of our ordinance? And so as far as the age goes, this was kind of why I initially wanted to keep our definitions more broad, because I think these are good points, but we're narrowing and like painting ourselves into a corner, I think, a little bit, in the sense that it's hard to offer a rebuttal to folks that are offering, well, why wouldn't you put the age of this way or this way? And so I would just love for us to explore, because our third reading is next week. I'd love to nail that down before we get up on the days next week, because I think Seth brings up a good point, and the other gentleman, I think, mentioned something that is worth exploration, at least on our part.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thanks. I think that's a great point, and I think we should probably talk about it. And one of the suggestions I was given by a neighbor lady is you can't order off the senior menu until you're 55. You can't, there are some housing places that are 55 and older, so why wouldn't you just go to 55? But the federal law is 45, I believe. And so we were just splitting the baby, I guess. But if 55 is better, I guess that would be good. I think the problem with the young is their lack of experience, their lack of just emotional and intellectual development at that age sometimes. And I think if we're giving them a sword, I think we may run into some problems there. Federal law, it's 21, I guess, to have a beer, right? But so, I don't know that we need to delve into those realms. There are certain protections for young people, but I'd be hesitant, but it's worthy of a conversation, certainly.
You get Amber, then I'll get you Kyle. Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I mean, I agree with Kyle. I'd like to have this nailed down before we make the final vote on the third reading. I tend to agree with Bruce. So I think that would be a more difficult area for us to venture into, because there isn't existing federal law that attends to youth. I mean, where we draw the line, in any case, the intent is to address older people being discriminated against, and there's like bucket loads of case law to address all those things too, and I don't think that exists for youth. And so when people are coming up saying like, oh, you're opening up like a whole can of worms and you're venturing in uncharted territory, I don't feel like we are with how it's written now. But I think that if we did try to deal with that issue in this ordinance, we would be. And so I would be cautious to try to do that at this juncture, at this time, when we're overcomplicating that. I agree that it probably needs to be addressed, and there's certainly some merit to that argument, but I'm not sure that I've seen any of the ordinances that we've been referencing across the country that attend to non-discrimination. I'm not sure that I've seen any of them that attend to non-discrimination in youth, and so I feel like maybe I don't love to be the guinea pig on something like that, so, but I do think we should have it hammered out before we move into third reading.
Thanks. To that point, I think there's merit to that argument that I don't, Casper City Council shouldn't be, I don't think on the frontier of developing, stuff that people have been talking about for decades. So if that is the stance that we're taking, I would love our non-discrimination ordinance to mirror the federal, we're being selective about how it compares and contrasts with the federal. We have protected classes that are in ours that aren't in federal. There's protected classes in federal that aren't in ours. Our age is different. So if we're going to rely on federal, what's been established at the federal level, I think we should do that, we shouldn't be selective about that, because I think that confuses what we're trying to do.
Amber.
Yeah, I'm suggesting federal and other municipal ordinance that's on the books in other places. So I think you do see some variation in those, and I think that's fine. I don't think I've seen anybody attempt this particular iteration, so I would not like to be the one to do that. I don't think that we have to draw a hard line at what's in federal. I think we can, there's somewhat of a range of what you see across non-discrimination ordinances across the country, but and I think we're within that range, but I haven't seen anybody try to address this particular element. So.
Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think landlords, for example, should have the latitude to not lease property to minors. I think business owners should have the latitude to not hire minors when they're concerned about that. So in other words, there should be some discrepancy in those situations to be worried about minors in that scenario. So yeah, I would completely agree. Trying to overbuild this ordinance in such a way that, minors should be allowed all the same privileges that adults have, it doesn't make a lot of sense right now. So I agree with the vein that we're going in right at this point.
Bruce and then Lisa.
Thank you. I will say, if there is something to what Kyle's saying, and if it is something we need to fine tune, if you will, that literally is going to happen right here, right now, because third reading is next week, and so
No, this is third coming up.
Third.
third reading.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah, because
2
we're off
weeks.
next week.
We're off next week.
Oh yeah, right. But next time we convene
Yes.
is the third reading. So if there is something to be, I guess, talked about or changed or done, this is the forum to do that in.
Lisa.
So a minor, anybody under the age of 18 cannot sign a legal binding contract for anything. And I would think that the discrimination for minors, you would have more bullying and whatnot going on with minors versus discrimination. But then when I had spoke with John specifically about the age, he was hesitant of wanting to put age into this ordinance due to the fact that you already have ordinances and it's a federal mandate and stuff about elder abuse and things of that nature. But I think that because the attorney kept showing up and saying that and everybody else was bringing up age, it kind of was forced into that because John initially didn't want to put in age at all. Maybe we just go back to eliminating age.
So here, let's do this. Why don't we let the staff go back and do some research on the age, especially the 50, 55 template, and then let us look at and have at our pre-meeting. Would that work, to do that at a pre-meeting? Because I think we're gonna open up a can of worms, and we can spend an hour right now at the work session, and it's not a topic on it. That we'll go down that road, if the council feels fair about that. Okay, go ahead, Amber.
Just last thing I would add is I would like to see us not open a can of worms. I mean, this ordinance has been back and forth with the committee and attorneys for 18 months, so I don't want to see us try to do too much manipulation, particularly at this point. Changes can be made, like we can go through the process if we need to update anything or anything like that. Like, I don't want to see us get in the weeds and derail something that has gone through quite a lot of work. And so if we need to go back to the original, that was already sort of approved, embedded over time with the committee and with our attorney's office, I'm comfortable with that. If there is a comfort level at this point to add in some sort of age element that we can agree on easily, great. If that seems too obtuse and it's gonna make this difficult for us, I think we should just go back to the original that we had, pass that, address the other things, later as we go.
And I think that can be done on the floor, where somebody can make an amendment to strike that if we want to, and go back to it. I think that's fair. Kyle and then Bruce.
Thanks, Ray. I would agree with Amber in the sense that this has been talked about for a long time. There's already lots of work into it. I don't want to see it die on the hill just because we're trying to define the details at this point. We can always go back and amend it after the fact and go through the readings again and everything. So I would not want significant revision at this point since we got the third reading coming up. But to the point earlier about minors, I believe Seth's concerns were he employs 18, 19-year-olds and he is having experiences where people are refusing, those people are legally allowed to sign contracts, and he has folks he's working with that are refusing to work with his younger staff, even though they're legally allowed to sign contracts, they're refusing to, abide by the word of, they're insisting that Seth sign the contracts as opposed to the 18, 19-year-olds working for him who are legally allowed. And so I think he was looking for a little bit of recourse or protection in that sense, but just something for us to keep in mind as we, think about that. I think that's an argument that has merit. Doesn't have all the case law and stuff to support it, but just something to think about.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bruce. Thank you. As staff is researching this, Carter, one of the things I'd be interested in knowing is how do landlords in 55 and over communities, how do they get through that when the federal is at 45 anyway? So I'd be interested to know that, because we do want to offer those 55 and older communities the same protections that they've enjoyed, and not having somebody sue them, some 49-year-old guy sue him because he wants to live there. So they need to have that, but I'm curious how they circumvent that in the federal.
I don't know about the federal, but it's in here in our ordinance exempting the 55s.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So basically how that works is that they apply for some type of a grant or something of that nature. And so that it is through the federal government. And so for us to build houses and you want 55 and older, we first have to go to the federal government to get permission to do so. And then they designate this neighborhood as 55 and older. And then you can't, even though you're 55, and if you have somebody younger, you couldn't have them there. So it is a very specific program through the federal government.
Kenny, did you have a comment?
So I run a HUD property for elderly, and basically if we want to, accept somebody that's, say, younger than what they would normally be when they come to my property, we write a letter, we get a doctor's prescription, so there's ways around that. But, HUD has it all lined out for us on what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that's how we'll move forward with this, and it sounds like if we want someone to move to do an amendment on that, we can do that, but we'll wait till we hear from Carter some of the update on it.
In the pre-meeting?
In the pre-meeting, yep.
We can do it.
Thank you, everyone, for that conversation. I appreciate it. And then we'll also get word on the address if that's necessary. Great, thank you. All right, moving along. Council straw poll. And I didn't welcome our elects. Welcome to you guys. Appreciate you guys being here. I know you're going to take a role in doing this as well. So I want to welcome you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I'll just go ahead and defer to the city clerk and she'll administer this process, if you will.
Have they been issued their iPads yet?
Not yet, no.
Your Honors, members of council. Tonight we're going to do the straw poll. So basically what we'll do is we'll start with the mayor ballot. I'll pass this out, you'll vote, and what we ask you to do is rank your choices. And then what we do is we count how many people have the first place, and then if there's a majority, that's the mayor. If there's not, we count the person who has the least, take that person out and recount with the twos becoming ones. And so I'll go ahead and do the mayor. Once we get done with that, we'll announce who is the next mayor or who will be the next mayor, and then we'll do the vice mayor. There's only 2 choices for vice mayor, so you won't need to rank, you can just vote for one. That's all right, I'll go ahead and start.
Okay, use this.
That's the official mayor pin.
That's a nice one. This is an official Bruce one, if I just happen to walk out with it by accident.
No, I do have a pen.
Be prepared.
Bleeds through. Neat, I like that, that's a nice pen.
You sign it.
Do flat maps?
Yeah, that map, thank you. Both of these are.
I was almost going to call it something else.
It's just like, start calling it, dip it. That's a flux capacitor.
But I was nice.
The flux capacitor.
You know what the flux-
Decided not to
You know
do
what a flux
that.
capacitor is? From Back to the Future. For did you hand out the,
Swing and a miss. Thank
can I
you.
get one?
Not to you. Oh. Deal.
Parents need to be like, be nicer and slap you.
Good luck, you two. Those of us that were willing to throw it.
Thank you all for
Indeed.
Good luck.
They chose the Fairfield Hotel to stay at.
in Cheyenne.
Have you guys notified Mr. Barrow?
Well, I kind of thought that I would be fiscally responsible. It was one of the cheaper ones. The red roof end seemed a little sketchy, so.
Liz, Liz, do you know if,
Some of it, yeah.
was Chris notified that he was on the, that his thing was on the agenda tonight? Are you aware? Navarro, are you aware if he was notified that he was on the agenda tonight? Carter, do you know?
I'll ask for her when she comes, yeah. Do you remember?
Those are awesome, Michael.
Was that
Those are awesome.
Renee?
I like them a lot.
Yeah.
It's like so not.
Good for you.
Do you do all the cooking
Oh, it's so cute.
at your house?
Most of it during the school year, because my wife works at school.
I need, it would have to get huge to do.
She'll cook on
Do you know if Mr. Navarro was notified?
And then when she's off in the
He was on the
summertime, I'll let her
agenda
do her
tonight, or his
home.
All right, it looks like the results for the informal, non-binding straw poll. Okay,
Very lawyery.
let's be clear. Bruce, you would be the next mayor.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
informally and
Formal, non-binding next mayor.
in an informal, unbinding way.
I will serve you humbly and proudly.
Informally and unbindingly.
What did you say?
So now if you would all vote on vice.
Pass it, Mark. Thank you.
I got all night.
Lock themselves out.
Wallace, you can't go in the kitchen on your own.
It's telling.
already migrated.
All for the winter.
So this wouldn't take place till spring anyway.
Be careful.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
At the earliest.
Have to bring cookies in.
I know, it's true, you gotta watch out.
And the results of the exact same kind of poll, the mayor, Checo for vice mayor next year. Congratulations.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks everyone. Let's move along. Wind turbine art installation update.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have taken a lot of time to go through and evaluate sites, to get feedback pursuant to the direction you gave us the last time we met on this topic, and even consider more broadly other potential installations that might be of interest. And the bottom line is as follows, and you probably have read this in your memo already, but first of all, the user groups and partner agencies that support Fort Casper are adamantly opposed to building a Stonehenge-type installation at Fort Casper. And so you probably picked up that flavor in the letters that we included in the packet as far as that response goes. So your request was to garner that feedback and see what in fact we would get, and that is what we got rather resoundingly. Secondly, I would tell you that in our evaluation of other sites and sites that not only would have a size component that would accommodate an installation like this, but also infrastructure kind of already in place that would accommodate traffic and that sort of thing. We could not really find a site that would be amenable to both of those criteria. There certainly would be neighborhood parks that have space that's adequate and a parking lot and those kinds of things, but we were really concerned with regard to the increased traffic that would bring into many of our residential areas. And so we considered that a non-infrastructure supported type option. And so from that standpoint, we just couldn't come up with a park, for example, that would make sense, as it were, for an installation of this nature. Remembering, of course, that we need at least a half acre. We do need parking that would be adequate, and the ability to accommodate a great deal of traffic. That certainly is the anticipation that with this installation, we will have a lot of folks coming to visit. We also considered a place like Lake McKenzie. And I would tell you that the concerns that were brought forward from that particular installation was that we would likely be in conflict with DEQ and their concerns, given that we would be in the proximity of an old landfill in that particular area. We also considered space by the event center, and you know that that's been a topic of interest as well. And I would say that if indeed you are still interested in the event center, that we probably ought to work through the master planning process to see how in fact a public art display of some kind could be built into that overall concept and approach. And so I think we have work to do yet if indeed council is still interested in considering the event center area. And that's obviously a very, very broad expanse of land and potential opportunity. My recommendation would be let's get through the master planning process and see how in fact something like that could be accommodated. So my bad news, I guess, for some of you would be we really don't have a solution that we found that would be appropriate for this type of an installation. And so my recommendation at this point is, as far as city property is concerned, I do not have a viable solution to bring to you. And so I didn't know what direction you might want to give staff in regards to that type of a recommendation. or what other kinds of things you'd have us look into, but at this point in time, I don't have anywhere to direct you for an installation of this nature.
Questions? Bruce?
Thank you. So, as a council, we need to have this discussion. It's not going to be a popular discussion, obviously, and this would probably be one of the biggest fights that we as a council would have if we pursue the Fort Casper area. But we have found out that it would go on that gravel lot, not on a graveyard. And the city manager, who I spoke to earlier, agrees with me on this point. This is gonna bring a lot of people to town. It's gonna bring a lot of money, and it would literally wipe out our subsidy at Fort Casper if we were to put it there. The amount of people that it would draw, the amount of infrastructure needed by us would not be great because we've already got parking there and the museum's right there. So it would literally shovel those people right into our museum and all but eliminate that subsidy, which we all know. We sit through the reports from Zulema and the department heads when it comes to these subsidies. So we have a responsibility to our constituents when it comes to dealing with subsidies, but we also have a responsibility to our constituents when it comes to putting a piece like this near something like Fort Casper, which personally I'm not opposed to it because it's, whether we like it or not, those windmills are going to be part of our historical history also, because no matter which direction you look out of the middle of town, you're going to see them in the air if you don't already. I personally like the idea of already having the parking there, already having the draw of the museum, and literally getting rid of that subsidy. And one of the things we talked about in leadership is, you know, we always get behind the little things. Well, we're going to raise rates 50 cents at the swimming area, and that's going to help get us closer to that 28% subsidy or whatever it is we're looking for. But when it comes to these bigger ones, we shy away from them. And here we literally have an opportunity to, and I don't know what our subsidy goal is for Fort Casper, but I think we're usually right around 20% and paid back. So we're 80% invested into that, where this would have a fantastic potential of just wiping it out completely. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's not going to be the popular public thing, but I'd love to open it up for debate on this floor and see where everybody else's minds are at. I'm not stuck either way, so.
Kyle?
Thanks, Ray. Was hoping for some clarification from Zulema or Carter, whoever has the information. My understanding was that the subsidy at Fort Casper was right around $300,000. Is that still fairly accurate?
Just under 310.
Okay, thanks. I thought the financial analyses that we got back from the other location that does the car henge, I thought it ended up being a fairly cost-neutral operation. Anybody recall how much revenue was generated from that? I thought I remembered it being cost-neutral. So the only reason I bring that up is because I think it's much more compelling if there is something to it completely removing our subsidy, but I thought, based on the information that I had, that I didn't know if it would have that significant of an impact on the subsidy.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I would say that the data that we got back certainly indicated that the cost to have the attraction is nullified by virtue of the visitors and so forth that come through. I am not aware, however, of a similar installation that is near another local attraction that creates that ancillary activity for the other attraction adjacent to an installation of that nature. And so I would suggest that if council is interested in pursuing that, location further, I would like to see if we couldn't build some data that would suggest what the traffic into the museum would all of a sudden become in order to create this ancillary business proposition. Councilman Nell is right. We are, that is probably one of our most upside down enterprises, if you will. And without a doubt, having another attraction there will build the interest in that facility, in that space, beyond anything we've probably ever seen. And so if indeed you're looking at big ideas to try to eliminate subsidies and so forth, sometimes you do have to think at this level as a scope or whatever. But as far as the data that would suggest what exactly this kind of an attraction would do, I do not have that prepared, and that would probably be additional homework we'd need to look into if you're interested.
Lisa and then Amber.
Although that I would love to be able to figure something out with this subsidy of Fort Casper. I also understand how it just does not fit the landscape there. Have we looked at the Emico Reuse Board? I mean, that whole area is on contaminated ground. It's not as if you could really build a building on it. And so something like that might be good in that particular area. Would that be something?
Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, we could certainly engage additional conversations with the Amico Reuse Joint Powers Board. The challenge that we had is they essentially are a private property owner, and we didn't really enterprise conversations with private property owners in an effort to try to sell someone else's project to them. We simply did the homework of evaluating property that we have control over, that we understand the infrastructure implications of, so that we could bring you a recommendation with respect to what we know and what we have, meaning the council, authority over. So we could certainly engage a conversation with those guys, but I would tell you it probably would involve a land purchase as well as a parking lot construction proposal.
Because as a follow-up, because I guess my thought process is if it was at the end of it towards 13th Street, then you've got the Veterans Memorial, then you've got the fairgrounds, and then you've got Fort Casper. So it could almost be something that in the entire area that people could just visit.
Sure.
I don't know.
I would still suggest, Mr. Mayor and Councilman, that you have to build then a tolerance for the idea of purchasing land and building a parking lot, infrastructure to support it in that scenario. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would guess that that's probably something you ought to consider.
Amber.
Thank you. From my standpoint, the business case for this has still not been made. In my wildest optimism, thinking about what this would do, I do not see it revolutionizing or dramatically impacting our visitor economy. I just don't see it. I don't think it will. I think the arts, people who work on public art and understand public art would agree, like it is not going to change the face of visitors and visitorship to Casper. I think the one business case we've seen is from middle of nowhere, which has its own, there is a culture of driving into the middle of the desert, looking at art that exists. There's a few installations throughout the desert. All the money from that came from gift shop sales, essentially, which I would doubt highly that we would be able to quadruple our gift shop sales at Fort Casper if this was installed. So as far as I'm concerned, I love public art. I'll go back again, if we want public art and if we think public art's important to us, great, let's make a plan for it. I don't see this dramatically, I think it's been oversold to us in terms of how much of a draw it will be and how much money it has the potential to generate for us. So I don't think we should make an economic case for it. I don't think the economic case is there. If we want it for some other reason, I could be convinced of that, but in terms of the economics of it, I just cannot see it.
Steve.
My concern about going someplace other than city property combines some comments that Carter made and some that Amber just made, is that basically if we go any place other than Fort Casper, you're looking at land purchase, you're looking at parking lot, you're looking at gift shop, you're looking at restroom. So if you go someplace other literally than Fort Casper, where you've got all of those things, I would have to go back along Amber's thought that it does not make economic sense.
Bruce.
Like I said, I'm not sold either way. I can be swayed either way on this, but I will tell you the economic sense for me is the fact that the energy company is willing to spend $750,000 to pay him to put this in, which includes the solar lighting and everything. And that's the one difference between this and Stonehenge is we don't need visitors to pay for it. It's already paid for. So economically, every person that visits is money in the bank because we're not paying to fund the build on it. So that's the economic sense for me. This place in Alliance, Nebraska is literally in the middle of nowhere. And if I remember the numbers, and I don't have them in front of me, I don't have my iPad, but I want to say it was around 169,000.
I have the numbers.
Huh?
I have the numbers.
You have them? What are they, Kyle?
So they had just over 100,000 visitors annually. After expenses in 2021, they made just shy of $61,000. It was built in 1987, originally built by a private family farm on property by the owner, and the state and the city required parking lot and access. So yeah, it looks like it's after expenses about 61 grand in revenue every year.
And in our situation, we wouldn't have the expenses because the whole thing is funded by the company, the energy company, and even the lighting there, because it would have the solar on top of it. And so, I don't know, economically, it does make sense to me just because somebody else is paying to build it, but that's here or there.
Kyle, do you have some?
Yeah, I guess to expand on that, I thought one of the emails we got, it sounded like there was no commitment on the part of NextEra for annual maintenance and upkeep, or it sounds like even the idea of construction of a parking lot that would be necessary, it sounds like we don't even have, for some reason I thought I remembered reading an email that indicated we don't have that solid.
Do you know, Carter?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I would agree. We do not have a commitment from NextEra to build a parking lot to accommodate the installation, which is why I think, you know, a place like Fort Casper had some appeal because most of the infrastructure would be in place. And so, yeah, I would agree with that. I do not anticipate that they would build that for us if we were to move forward.
Amber.
Thank you. I mean, I think in did you have something related?
No, ma'am, I can wait, thank you.
I think in my experience being on council, there are a number of projects, like I'm just projecting forward 20 years to the council, sitting here and being like, why'd they build that? Now we got ground maintenance to do, right? We've got all of these different maintenance items, even if NextEra says like, we'll pay to refinish it every 3 to 5 years or whatever it is, right? There's still going to be carrying costs to deal with this structure. And I think we're putting a lot of confidence in a long-term commitment from an outside company to maintain this. We've got grounds maintenance, we've got snow removal, we've got a host of other expenses associated with putting this in. So I think that when we think about the, let's say, best case scenario we do as well as Alliance Nebraska is, and we've got, what's their gift shop revenue?
$60,899.
That's their profit, right?
That's a profit.
Yeah. I'm just not sure it's worth the potential liability that it creates for us as it ages, as we have to deal with the grounds, as we, as we've got the parking lot that needs to be refinished because we have, increased traffic or whatever it might be. So again, like I don't see this being a silver bullet for for Casper or any sort of revenue, I am totally on board with installing public art if that is, but I don't think we should do it because we think it's going to pay off monetarily ever. I think it should be purely from a standpoint of, we want it, we love it, it makes our community better, so that's why we wanna put it in. So if we're gonna do it, I think that that's the sale to the public, not that, hey, it's gonna solve our Fort Casper problem and I don't think we have a Fort Casper problem, but that's, the narrative, personally. But I just think that shouldn't be our justification for proceeding with the project, because I think their odds are very high that does not pan out for us in a way that makes our revenue picture look dramatically different once all factors are taken into account.
Bruce, I'm gonna step in it. I do think we have a Fort Casper problem.
I know you do.
I do. Well, I'm talking from a financial standpoint, on the hit that our general fund takes every year to subsidize it. And I'm not saying this is a cure-all either, but what I would like to do is get the council to at least, if we could, give staff permission, if we would be willing to do that, do the homework and see what that impact would be if we put it there, and how it may or may not help with that subsidy, and what type of impact it may have on visitorship to Fort Casper and to our financial bottom line. I think that would be important to know before we just make a decision and nix it or whatever, so.
Lisa?
I just have a question. So with Fort Casper being a historical site, can we?
Can we build something there?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, I'm not sure if there are any necessarily exclusive types of uses that site is protected under. Certainly, I'd be concerned about building anywhere that might have artifact type concerns and whatnot. As far as that gravel lot is concerned, I wouldn't be as worried since we've already been in there and built things and so forth at that part of the campus. But I think you get to determine as the owners of that property what you want to do. Maybe not in every square inch of that in terms of some of the artifact issues that you might encounter, but I think council has some authority here.
Thanks, Ray. I would agree with Amber that I'd be really hesitant to bank on any economic return. I mean, Alliance is being held up as the kind of gem of how this works, and they're only making $61,000 a year, so I think that would be our absolute best case scenario. So I am also really hesitant to bank on the economic return from it. What I'm more curious, but I agree with Bruce in the sense that we should be really aggressively looking at any and all ways to reduce our subsidies to our 5 main assets as a city. To that point, I was trying to pull it up, didn't get quite there, but the Fort Casper Museum Association, in their email to us, I think it's in our information packet from this last week, they referenced an instance of the Premier Pony Express exhibit, potentially even an add-on to the Fort Casper Museum. It sounds like something that sounds like something they were really jazzed about a few years ago. That to me makes way more sense to have at Fort Casper, considering the history of our area and its relationship to Pony Express. And so perhaps that opportunity is long gone and past, but I would be curious to hear more of either revisiting that idea or working with the Museum Association to come up with those big, out-of-the-box kind of ideas. I think they're kind of better suited. They know their clientele, they know the demographic of the people that come visit the museum way better than we do, and so I would be much more curious to hear from them. What are their revolutionary ideas? It sounds like that was one of them, and for one reason or another, it didn't pan out, but So again, interested in revisiting that, if that's even a possibility. Could have been built elsewhere by now, but that, something like that seems much more in line than a public art installation, which I would agree with Amber. I'm not sold on the economic impact of public art. I think people, appreciate it, but it provides a value that can't necessarily be quantified and, just additional revenue to the city necessarily, so.
I think for my take on it, I really want this to work, but I'm hesitant to put it on the Fort Casper site. I think it's gonna be a tough sell. I think we're gonna see some pushback, major pushback, that I think you're gonna have, if we decided to move forward with it. Not to say that it's not good to, move forward, especially if you do have pushback, but reading that letter from Con, I get where they're coming from, I understand that. And so I think it certainly will be a fight for us to move that forward. I think, ultimately for me, I think I'm gonna be a hard pass to put it there, but I'm willing to look at other avenues if I can. But I'm really having a hard time with this one, because I'd love to see it happen, but I just agree a lot with Amber on where she's coming from, so. Yeah.
I'm certainly happy to see an analysis if we feel like one can be generated. I mean, I said the case hasn't been made to me. I didn't say it can't be, so I'm certainly willing to hear that out. I don't think Alliance Nebraska is necessarily it's a single data point, and I don't think that is like we can expect those same results necessarily. So I certainly think that there would need to be a range of sites that might have some similar attributes looked at. Certainly don't have to be hinge related. I think that's why this one came up as a comparison, but there are plenty of public art installations that exist that we could try to draw from. So certainly happy to see that. If that changes the picture dramatically for me, I'm certainly open to changing my mind on it.
So real quick too, and I just kind of briefly just asking Carter some steps forward. The analysis is at one point, but the question is, I think if we are like Fort Casper's not going to happen, I don't think there's really a point for them to go through and try to look through those numbers. To have to say, hey, staff, go look for this. If the council's really going to be like saying, yeah, Fort Casper's just not going to be our spot. So think about that, I guess, as we move through that. So, Bruce and then Amber.
Would it be prudent to ask you to go back one more time and maybe see if there is some other city property somewhere that would work that maybe we overlooked or maybe wasn't in our scope? I know you guys have put a lot of work into it, so I don't want to sell you short on the amount of time you've invested in this. But is there an opportunity that maybe we've missed something, or maybe there's something else out there that might? It's not that I'm pushing for this. I was really just after that subsidy myself, because I think we have a responsibility to do that. But what I'm hearing from the council is that's not the place to do it. And I'm certainly okay with that. Like I said, I wasn't hard set either way. I like the idea of reducing subsidies, of course, but I also don't want to shut the door on a $750,000 project that somebody's willing to install, if it's going to help us out. So is it going to? I don't know. I'm like Amber. I could be sold either way, really. So,
Carter, have you guys exhausted all the possible places we could put it? Sorry.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I think if council were willing to adjust their criteria a little bit so that our filter was a little more generous, then I think we could probably open up.
Meaning?
So in other words, if there's pieces of property where putting in a parking lot does not bother you, then I think we could come up with a whole list of properties that make some sense. But as far as properties go where parking lot and, accommodating infrastructure already exists, I would say we probably have exhausted that list. So adjusting your filter perhaps for us in terms of what you're willing to accept as alternatives to consider would help us a lot.
Well, as a follow-up then, I guess I'd like to see us go to Mr. Navarro and say, if the energy company's willing to throw in a little bit more in order for us to put the parking lot in, since we're gonna be maintaining it over the years, then I think the council might be more amenable, if you will. But I don't know right now, especially with our infrastructure needs and everything else, we don't really have the money to go put a parking lot in just so somebody can have a piece of art on the ground. But if he came back and said, yeah, they'll throw in $150,000 and you can put in your gravel parking lot, then we might have something to talk about, I would think. The only reason we were stuck on the other one was because we were looking for a place with a parking lot.
Right.
So I get your filter thing, but in order for that filter to be, the scope of that to be opened up, I would have to say they gotta come with a little more money in order to help do that.
Joy.
Okay, thanks. I guess just to share my thoughts, I would be a hard no on Fort Casper as well. But I do think I agree with being open to seeing what some kind of analysis for another location would, what information that we could find in terms of how this might affect tourism or the, I don't know, just the positive impacts of public art in general. And I think we've looked at, we're starting to have the conversation about the master plan around the event center. I don't know that either of the two areas where we just had the zoning conversation makes sense. But I do think that the appeal of Stonehenge itself, Carhenge as a alternative part of it is the destination appeal and the fact that it's kind of in this random location and how did these things happen and so I think if we're looking like almost the random like destination point might be part of the story, part of the allure of it. And so maybe there's some property we have if we're widening the filter down the line. Maybe something does make sense, but I think it needs to be part of the broader strategy and development strategy up in that area.
Amber.
At risk of sounding contrarian again to what I already just said, I would say though, if we believe that just conceptually, even if it's not this piece, that public art is a big draw, it could be a big draw for Fort Casper, I don't think that there's necessarily harm in doing that analysis at some point, or asking the folks at the museum or whoever might be able to weigh in on that, because I do not fundamentally disagree with the idea that there would be no synergy between an additional attraction in that area that would create, sort of a double up effect. It's like, well, while we're here, we might as well pop over to the next, the other thing. And so I'm not sure that analysis feels like critical to me to do right now, but as we are looking at subsidy discussion, I think public art is certainly a worthy thing to put on the table, and it sounds like predominantly it's the style of the art that is at issue here, that it doesn't really connect to the museum story necessarily. So, it could be that the folks at the museum would feel very differently about something that was more, more related to what is going on near the museum, and maybe that would could have some amount of synergistic effect. I still don't think it's gonna revolutionize no matter what public art you put there, I don't think that would be the thing that revolutionizes our subsidy, but I do think that there is some value in the creating more ways for the visitors to interact with that space, as creating additional draw to get people there and ultimately into paying admission and into the gift shop.
Say something? No, I see what you, yeah, they would consider, okay. Kyle, or Lisa and then Kyle.
Up at the event center, is there a parking lot with the equestrian whatever? I've never been there, so I have no clue, but I know that it's underutilized.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, it is far, far underutilized. I'm not sure that I've ever seen equestrian use up there in a lot of years. And I'm sure it kind of ebbs and flows, but in terms of how they access that area and so forth. Selima, do you have some insight there?
Mayor, council members. So the vast majority of the equestrian property was actually leased to the Skeet Club because that group has sort of dissolved and they're no longer, engaged in their equestrian activities. So we have leased a majority of the property to the Skeet Club, so that they can expand their shooting experience and the safety around the property.
And they do have a parking lot that they access their facility from.
Kyle?
Thanks, Ray. Just to Amber's earlier point, as far as the aesthetic, sharp contrast with what's going on at Fort Casper, in their letter, they did indicate that something like a teepee style, I think they disagree with it just because it conflicts with kind of the identity of the museum and the other works that they have there, but I think they indicated, I don't know if they'd be thrilled at it, but they indicated that they'd be much more open to like a teepee type design than Windhenge, which they argued was more Neolithic, European, totally removed from the history of Fort Casper. So, just something for, I know, I believe Chris is the one that is a really big fan of the Windhenge design and really wants that one done, but could also explore a different design that I think would be a lot more amicable to user groups. Thanks.
So I think Carter's looking for direction. I know we kind of went around like this and then come back to the beginning. So it sounds like to me that there is really not support on council to put it at the Fort Casper site, unless I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right.
Okay. Looks like there was some request for Carter to go look for possible other areas. If we broaden ourselves, is council okay with that? With Carter to go look at that?
Well, I think we'll have to have Carter or Fleur reach out to Mr. Navarro and ask him what the likelihood or the possibility is of them ponying up a little bit more in order to construct a parking lot before we even broaden our filter to see if that's available. Because to go out and find land and say, that would work, but it's gonna take X amount of dollars to do a parking lot. I think we need to find out if if either Chris is willing to give up part of that profit into doing the parking lot to make it all happen, or if he can get the energy company to give up more money in order to do it. Because I don't think the city, by any stretch, should be on the hook for building a parking lot for someone's private sculpture. So, that's my opinion.
I would agree with it.
Okay. So is that fair, Carter, to maybe look into what possible alternatives there are? Number one, obviously other places down the road, but also if they're willing to invest in further to broaden that up for us.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I assume then the corollary to that particular proposal is that if Nextera says, nah, we're not doing that, then my search becomes real shortened.
And it
Fair?
sounds like it puts an axe in the deal,
Yeah.
or a wind blade, if you will. Is that a good one right here?
No. Wasn't feeling it.
Damn it.
You liked it.
Thank you, Amber.
So council, if Carter does come back and Nextera is like, nope, this is just not gonna happen, I mean, I'm not sure what other choices are, to be frank.
Kyle's idea is a good one.
The,
Have Chris come up with a different idea to put it at Fort Casper.
Like teepees or something? Uh-huh.
yeah. So
He already
He
has.
can
that would
expand
fit,
on that.
that would fit more thematically, I think,
The
with,
one above it.
yeah, they might be more interested. I'm not saying that they would, but they might.
Well, the truth is Stonehenge isn't even American. It's, not only is it not Fort Casper or Wyoming, it's not even American, honestly, so. Not that I'm opposed to that, by the way, but maybe on the museum.
We need wind blades that do the car hinge.
What's
That's
that?
American.
Carve them in the machine.
Amber.
And I would say, I mean, the good news is it sounded like there was some other interest too from Collaborative Trails and some other things. So like in terms of the community being able to see a sculpture like this, access a sculpture like this, I don't think that it's,
It's dead.
it's not gonna happen. I think there still may be avenues for it. So I think that's a good outcome and that it doesn't put the city at risk, at a liability for it.
So council's okay with Carter to check in to see if Nixcara would play ball, and then if not, then we'll.
I guess just put it back in Chris's lap and, I mean, he's the one that brought it to us, so, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you, everyone. Unsafe structures update, Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. With the inception of this ordinance, council asked that we return and visit periodically as it relates to some of the activity that we're seeing under this type of legislation. And so this is our first return and report to you as it relates to what we are finding and the activity that we're getting and the calls that we're getting and that kind of thing. And so you saw a flavor of that in your memo that we prepared for this topic. We have Mr. Elston and Liz here tonight to give you much more detail, if you would like, as to some of the calls that we're getting, some of the efforts that we're extending, and results that we're finding. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, if I could defer, I'd appreciate that.
Mr. Elston.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come before you again this evening. So I am willing to entertain any questions that you have.
Should you sit down?
Ordinance. Yes, ma'am?
Do you need to sit down?
Not this time. If I do, I kind of do that on my own. But anyhow, the memo has pretty much the information as far as what we've had for unsafe structures for this last calendar year. There is, in that, there's a lot of requests for unsafe structures that doesn't go this far. A lot of phone calls are made. Typically, an unsafe structure will start with something like this. This is a note I will have on my desk that somebody has called and they feel that their structure is unsafe. A lot of times it happens, as such as in this case. This is a very recent one that I'm working with right now. It says walls cracking, floors slanting, feels like building is going to fall down. Black mold, ceilings in some units have fallen down. And unfortunately, this is not the occupant. This is a friend of the occupant. And what happens is the occupant does not want to be identified. And in that, it makes with our unsafe structures ordinance and procedure, we request that a formal letter of complaint that is sent to the owner or responsible party so that they have the ability to respond to it. And so this is sitting in limbo right now, seeing if the occupant is willing to submit that letter of complaint, and then we take the unsafe structures ordinance and procedures are sent to them, and they follow those procedures as we move forward. So we will have, even though we had 9 cases last year, and that's in your memo, and what happened with each of those cases, we've probably had, I would say, between probably around 20 or 25 calls with people on searching out for an unsafe structure to see what that would happen. Unfortunately, we do have some people that use this. A lot of times they're already gone from they have left, and they've not left in maybe terms that are agreeable with the landowner or the property owner or the responsible party, and there may be deposits or something like that, some monetary value that's in there, and that is pretty well weeded out with our structures ordinance and procedure to where that's stopped to where we don't not have a lot of those. Like I said, I probably had 20, 25 calls this year, and we've come down to 9 before it moves any further forward. So, okay.
Questions for Dan? Yeah, Amber.
Dan, do you feel like the ordinance and policy as it sits right now is generally working pretty well? You think that the complaints that are being pursued are you're able to pursue them as you think is appropriate? Are there changes that you think need to be made or updates need to be made now that you've seen it in action for a while?
With what we have in place right now, it works very well. it could always be increased, but, and expanded upon. Right now is for rental properties only. And in that, I have had some requests on properties that are not rental, and I'm unable to enforce the unsafe structures ordinance in that. And with that, it can be, a scenario on that would be maybe say Department of Family Services or somebody else, or Meals on Wheels sees a situation that they have, and they ask me if there's something I can do about that, and I'm unable to enforce the ordinance on that. But for what we have, for what's written, it has worked very well and has cleaned up some stuff. It has. A lot of the owners and responsible parties, once they're notified, a lot of them, even though it might not be unsafe, they will go in and correct those issues. So it has worked well in that respect.
Right.
Anything that you could see that we could do from your standpoint to help with the folks who don't feel comfortable following up or pursuing the process that's in place? Is there anything that you can think of that we could do to help them access that?
I am not aware of how legally, if we could go to a landowner and say we have this anonymous complaint,
Sure.
how that would be able to be administered.
Sure.
Because I would not be able to answer that in that way.
Yeah, Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember, I think that's a very interesting question, because the reality is some of the concern that was brought to the table with the advent of this dialogue was that there would be a number of baseless complaints that, you know, would be brought forward and based on some issue between the landlord and the occupant and whatnot. So I like the requirements that the ordinance has in place now, albeit fairly minimal, because all it's really suggesting is that a formal letter be submitted so that those issues can be memorialized and forwarded to the owner and that kind of thing. I would be concerned that any other levels of participation that were less than that would lend itself to baseless complaints and complaints that were found to be frivolous and based on grudges and stuff like that. So I like how it's put together, and I like the fact that the complainant has to have some level of accountability to what the issues are, not because they caused it, but because they need to get us involved in an appropriate way.
Amber.
Agreed. It seems to me, though, that there could be, and maybe this is not your experience, but I suspect that a number of folks don't pursue it out of fear of retaliation or, you know, something of that nature. And so I guess I'd be curious if there's any ability, and maybe it's as simple as, you know, letting folks know who we reach out to say you need to file this letter, and just say, like, generally speaking, we're able to resolve these things. Like, you know, if once we have a track record of the ordinance, we can let them know that 90% of them are resolved, just more of like a peace of mind issue than anything formal. But I can definitely see why a tenant might be worried about submitting an official letter in this type of case of fear of retaliation. So I don't know, like, what protections we might be able to provide, or, you know, information we might be able to provide to help them feel more secure in putting forward a process.
Kyle and then Lisa.
Thanks, Ray. That was one of the points I was going to make. Is I'd be curious what sort of reassurances, if any, there are in place for folks to not fear that retaliation, and if there are none, I'd be curious to have that discussion. Number two, Dan, I was curious in the sense that the complaint must be received as a formal letter. Sounds like through email or probably in person. Is there any reason you feel like that is a necessary component, or is this something that we could potentially integrate into our 311 app? I'd like to centralize as many things as possible, so I don't know if there's any opportunity for us to roll this into the app and kind of put it alongside some of the other complaints and feedback that we're asking our citizens to give us.
Lisa.
Okay, so this is completely in my wheelhouse here. So when this ordinance was not quite in place just yet, I had 2 tenants who were problem tenants just to begin with. One of them actually caused significant damage to her residence. And then when we went in to fix it, we were going to bill her. So what she did was she called the city so that we wouldn't charge her for the damages she caused. Instead, she got evicted for all of that. Second, then I had another tenant who just didn't want to pay rent. Just didn't want to pay rent and wanted the city to intervene because they wanted to buy some more time and wanted to drag things out. Tenant landlord law is for the state, which clearly states that if we have problems, kind of like this friend did this, all they have to do is submit a letter, send it certified to your landlord, and in 7 days, if the landlord does not fix it, you can move out, vacate, and you're entitled to get 100% of your security deposit back. So that's tenant landlord. So we do have protections through the state to protect these tenants. So making things easier for somebody to just come in and because they don't feel like paying rent, you're gonna get nothing but. That's all you're gonna get, is just people, or they'll trash a house and then they'll turn the landlord in because they don't wanna be charged for their damages. You have to understand what tenants do. They do tenant things. So you don't want that piece of it easier, but if there's legitimate problems, we do have, I think this is a good avenue. Plus, they also have it through the state that you just submit a letter and if the landlord's refusing to fix it, they can vacate and get their security deposit back.
Bruce?
Kyle, awesome. What a great idea. I would think we could integrate that into 311 really easily, and I think that is just a fantastic idea. And secondly, isn't there an opportunity for someone, like in that situation, Dan, that you had on that piece of paper where that other person could call code enforcement and have them come in and, if there's something going on or whatever, there's other ways to circumvent without having to put your name out there, isn't there?
On the code enforcement side, I really could not answer that for you, but as far as for enforcing the unsafe structures, that comes through the building official, which is me at this time.
Okay.
And so that's why it comes directly to me.
Well, as a follow-up, and I'm just trying to get on Amber's train of thinking, if that friend of the person that's living there calls code enforcement, and code enforcement comes and looks and sees, can't code enforcement then come to you and initiate something?
Code enforcement does send those to me, but I need to have access to the apartment, which the occupant can allow me that access, but then they're identified.
Right.
Pretty much, as in this case, a lot of those do not want to be identified.
Understand. Okay, well, thank you.
Carter, is it possible to integrate into 311, or are there any concerns or issues with that? I mean, I know you probably have to do some investigating, but.
Sure, and yeah, I think, Mr. Mayor, the use of 311 is something we're always interested in entertaining because we want that to be very, very useful. My only concern would be using 311 as a substitute for the memorialization that we need when we're building potentially a litigation type case. Because oftentimes what can happen is, people tend to want to sue the city from time to time. And if we don't have the right, memorialization and paper trail and everything else in place, I am nervous myself. And I'm not near as nervous as this guy, 9 times out of 10. So that would be my only concern. I think starting a process with 311 makes a bunch of sense. I like that idea. But as a substitute for the, for the memorialization that we need along the way, I think we might be, that might not quite fit the bill.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else have questions for Dan?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
She
Thank you,
told me
Dan.
to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for presenting that.
Can I get you a cookie, sir?
No, I don't need it.
Good, Michael.
All right. Update on our council goals. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We are at the point now where our 2-year window with respect to the goals that this council set is winding down. And council is aware too that indeed throughout the process, we have tried to check in with you on occasion. We implemented the portal system that allowed you to check in on how we're doing, sort of at will, at your leisure. Nonetheless, we are, going to be asking those that follow you, folks over here along the wall, as well as all of you, what our next steps are, what goals the next council would like to see. And so we tonight are intending on not only informing you the progress that we made, but also any recommendations that you would like us to carry forward based on some suggestions we might have to help your successors in this conversation probably in January. You'll recall that you gave us 3 real broad kinds of goals and even helped us along the way with a number of objectives. We filled in the blanks as well with, I think we counted 98 to-do list items that you'll find we did the vast majority of since May of 2021, right? We are sharing this information with you tonight as also sort of a return report feature, but to answer any questions that you might have, and again, potentially any lingering direction that we would carry with us into the next year.
Questions?
Well, Pete actually has a presentation.
That's what happens when you step away. You come back in here and not pay attention.
Maybe I'm done. Thank you.
Great presentation.
Come on, man.
Great job, Pete. Get out. Now Pete has a presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Good job, Pete. See ya.
You bet, Pete.
No, first of all, thank you. Yes, I do have a presentation, very, very short. I do want to point out too that, yes, this is the council goals. I'm here to present them, but I don't want to take ownership of them overly much. First of all, yes, the entire process was started with Julian Martinez 2 years ago. When she met with all of you and got things up and running. And you may have also noticed that this room is unusually full of department heads. That's because they all care a lot about this. They've all been very, very involved for the last year and a half now, getting these things up and running and getting them executed. I talk to them regularly to keep this process going. And so I don't want to minimize anybody else's contributions to all of this. Just as a refresher, yes, as the city manager mentioned, maybe you guys remember this from, presented on this a little more than a year ago. This is the thing that looks a little bit like the periodic table of the elements. It's all the stuff we got to do. These are the 98 tasks. You might notice that there are quite a few less on this presentation than the ones a year and a half ago. That's because we have been checking them off as we go along. So I do want to give you guys a sense for where we're at with all these tasks and goals, and also, how much more we've got to do, because we're not done yet. So, in terms of the presentation, so council goals update. First of all, what are council goals? I should probably mention that, especially for those of you who were around this first time around. Council traditionally does council goals once every 2 years. Traditionally, as a council comes in, after an election, there will be a time where the council members are going to get together and they want to think in terms of what do we want to get done in the long term, typically over a 2-year period. Major things that are going to take a while. They're going to take multiple steps, multiple iterations, perhaps direction along the way. So the council goals are supposed to be cross-cutting, long-term, big picture kinds of things that you guys wanted to get done. So this was done a year ago, and we do, as the city manager mentioned, we do expect you will want to do again in the upcoming year. Once the new council is seated, and once you've established start to think about what you want to accomplish long-term over the next 2 years. Certainly, this is not everything. You always have day-to-day issues, things that come up as you go along, but these are supposed to be things that provide focus for us as city staff especially. Things to focus, things that we can use as guidance, like, okay, council asked us to do this, keep working on this. And we certainly do bring this up on a regular basis at a staff level. We talk about, council said do this, keep working on this. So, these are the 3 overarching goals you got to last time. Infrastructure, business investment, public engagement, those are certainly the I call it mission statement level, but break it down into many little steps. In this case, this is 15 steps. Call them cat tasks if you like, but certainly within that, any subtasks. Facility assessment, which is looking at all of our facilities. We've got a police facility, establishing a police facility long-term for the police department, and so on and so forth. These aren't little things to get taken care of. And they take a while. And so with all the sub-steps, we came up with that bar system, the periodic table of the elements, as a way to bring it all together so we can have steps by step by step to get things done. Starting at the beginning here, citywide facility assessment. This was a goal we established to do an overall assessment of all the city buildings, making sure that things were made to try to find a sense for what's breaking down, what's out of date, what we're going to need to invest in order to keep these facilities going. As you may recall, we hired Alpha Facilities to do a full assessment of many city buildings. We came back with a report. The report said that there was $20 million worth of facilities which have, or should say $20 million worth of systems and facilities which were past their expected useful life. Those are things that, they're not failing yet, but they could go at any time because that's what expected useful life means. And so, as a way to deal with that, first of all, we came to the report, we presented it to you. We certainly have started to budget money to deal with that. 117 has about $5 million set aside for various building projects. We hope that will be enough to keep things going over the next 4 years, to repair facilities as we need to, as these structures start to break down. But again, this is a change from previous one since we haven't put out this much money towards building repair in previous iterations. But that's what the report seemed to say. That's what we need to have something available to do that. Another aspect of this is keeping public input. That part of the task is still ongoing. We certainly have a system now in place where we talk a lot to the lessees, especially of those rented facilities that we have, the expert track or so on and so forth. So we get a lot of input from those groups as far as what's breaking down in their places and so on. But we also are trying to get together as far as the MyCivic 3-in-1 app. That's in process. You guys just mentioned it for possibly private building, but certainly we're already working towards getting it for public buildings so that as anybody walks through, they can come in and say, hey, there's a crack window or problems on the floor, whatever. Infrastructure police facility, we did mention this. Certainly you guys are aware. This was a long time figuring out this process. We started talking about it even at the beginning of 116. Set aside money for what it would do to explore and figure out what a new police facility might be. As you guys are all aware, the police department currently works in a rented facility across the street in the Hall of Justice. So, of course, we work very well with the county. The county is a landlord for years, but it's just too small, and we need a full place for the entire police department to be. And so, after looking at 11 different buildings, different potential sites, both new build and existing, council decided to go ahead and buy the Casper Business Center, which, by the way, is where my office is down on Strand Street. So we are currently working towards renovating that. We've hired an architect. That work is going, and it's our hope that the architectural work will be done later on this year, which is to say in like March, June, something like that. Then we'll be able to do the renovation, and then we'll be able to go forth and actually have the building ready in about 18 months after that. So again, long story short, significant progress on this goal. Lots has happened. it's not an easy thing to put together a project of this scale, but certainly a lot of work has happened, especially in the police department. And Deputy Chief Cheney has been doing a lot of leadership on this project. So, wastewater treatment plant. This was a goal about staying on top, staying abreast of potential both infrastructure needs of the plant, which may or may not be driven by additional regulation. In this case, we have the NPDES permit, which just comes up every 5 years. That's the National Pollution Elimination Discharge System permit, which we have to do every 5 years. That can come with major regulations. It can come with new things that the wastewater treatment plant has to do. The wastewater treatment plant, it takes a lot of work and effort to take sewage and purify it enough to make it clean water. There's a lot of stuff involved, both in terms of removing the solids, digesting it, running through screens of various kinds. It is a major energy-intensive process, and it's a huge facility for those who haven't been there. It's something like 20 acres with many buildings in order to make this all work. We had some amount of nutrient removal would be in this next iteration, especially. Nutrient removal would be an additional process added to the system, and that could have been tens of millions of dollars. We don't know. It could have been a major additional investment that the council would be asked to do. All indications are that our new NPDES permit require that, which is great. It sounds like the North Park River is clean enough that the effluent that we are creating is not going to be problematic, at least for the next 5 years. And certainly we'll have to deal with this again, or at least keep in touch in 2028. But for right now, it seems like we're okay. That doesn't mean that you don't have major costs coming up. Don't want to give a false sense of hope. Still, the wastewater treatment plant is old. It was built in 74, 73. It's an aging facility. And so I know we've got more than $3 million of concrete work we're going to be asking for you to help us fund. In the next couple of years, we're going to have to do a lot of MCC replacements. Lots of that mechanical systems are going to need to be replaced. And that's despite the fact that we're not being hit with additional higher money regulation. So we are still working ahead as far as staying in touch with our regulators and also trying to come up with long-term plans for how to keep up on the maintenance and so on. But I guess for the most part, we're feeling like we have to stay the course. Street repair. The street repair, of course, this has been a repeatedly discussed issue here at the council. As you guys know, our street pavement index was not a good score a couple of years ago, and they were talking a lot about how we might need another $7 million a year just to maintain our streets in their current state, much less falling behind. Certainly, we've been trying to be very proactive about getting funding for streets and getting that funding out the door so that we can get some of these street projects under control. This year alone, we're going to be funding $9 million on street projects. And by the way, I do have a cheat sheet if you guys would like here it is, of some of the street projects that we're funding this year, just in case you guys would need a refresher. Most of the funding is coming from the 1 cent because, of course, that's where we spend that's where we get most of our street infrastructure money. But we are going to get a nice $2 million grant from the federal government. We do have some money left over from that was given to us from the county for the reconstruction of Wolf Creek Road. We took that road over from the county, and various other sources as well. So we are trying to rally our forces and get our streets under control. That's in addition to the fact that 1 cent 17 just passed. And so now that it's passed, we have tried to emphasize streets in that. We have upped the amount of money coming in for streets in 1 cent 17 versus 1 cent 16. Again, all with the idea of trying to stay on top of this goal of getting the streets under control. Stormwater system. You might notice there's certainly the stormwater system is the system that takes rainwater and shunts it over the streets, through the gutters, through the storm system, and to the rivers and through the creeks. Unlike the water system, the sewer system, the refuse collection system, which are all funded, they're funded by rates from the citizens, the stormwater system is not funded. there is no source of funding that we use to maintain and operate. We have certainly used 1 cent money to keep it going, but there's no special set of money for keeping it running, and it's becoming a problem. The stormwater system is old, and certainly we've had some critical failures over the years. Some quite dramatic, be it major sinkholes or major outflows that have literally fallen into the river. It's an old system, and so to come up with a system of running it in a way that it can have some sort of generation of funding, some sort of reliable source of funding, so that we can stay on top of these. That's something we need to do. We haven't done it yet. This is something we definitely want to talk to you, the council, with in the coming months, because. And I do want to point out too that, yes, we do have another 6 months left before we meet our deadline on the council goals. So this is one of the ones where we definitely want to talk to you guys more about what that might look like, how that kind of system might be set up, and how we might build it, both administratively and so on. Because there are a lot of choices that are going to have to be made in terms of how that kind of system will be set up and to what extent it will be funded. So this one stands out because we haven't done it. This one is most of the others.
Can I ask a question while he's on
Go
that?
ahead, yep.
Carter, do we have in our budgetary process, are we starting a stormwater fund, if you will, so that there is money there? Or is this just every time something happens, we go to the general fund, or what's your plan, I guess is my question?
Well,
Since it's unfunded.
yeah, I appreciate that question, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Vice Mayor. This is exactly, you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of the conversation we need to have. The council has the option of creating an enterprise dedicated to stormwater. You have the option of, determining how in fact you'd like to fund that. And you also have the option, once you consider that series of questions, what some of your goals would be in terms of how you would fund those projects and to what extent the assessments that you see here would take place. So we've got a lot of conversation I'd like to have there. I think any success with regard to this idea would be far better than what we do right now, which is just basically going to the general fund, shaving pieces and parts from other water projects that we're working on and street projects and so on to deal with significant high priority issues. This would be a much more balanced, directed, and managed, methodical approach to dealing with a major asset in our community.
Follow up, if I may. If I'm hearing Pete right, this is not only a problem, but the problem is exacerbating. It's getting worse. So we're going to have to do something, right?
I sure hope so.
Okay.
Man, I sure hope so.
All right, I just wanted to throw that on the radar because that's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And like a lot of long-term problems, that's one of the reasons why this one was identified. We had to do something, and so certainly this one was raised to the level of the council goal to deal with the stormwater system.
Kyle.
Thanks, Ray. Just to add on to that point, because this is a topic that I've fixated on since I got familiar with the numbers. I don't know how current they are, but at least as of a year ago, we identified $40 million in backlogged repairs, identified that it would require somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a year to maintain those systems, and we had previously only been using $40,000 a year. So just for a reminder where we're at with that one.
Thank you.
Moving on, river restoration, of course, Council, I know you've gotten a number of presentations from Ms. Martinez about river restoration. Certainly, this has been a long-term issue as well. We've divided the river up into 7 different reaches. We've done major projects on 4 of them. This goal was to keep that process going. So we've already done more work now on the Isaac Walton project is coming up. That should be doing the renovation of that reach. We're still working towards getting another one going as well to try to finish up those last 3 reaches. Certainly there's a lot of stuff in here that we believe to be grant funded. We've been very successful over the last few years about getting grants to fund the river. Certainly because once that money is a lot of matching funding to get those grants and to leverage those into additional funds. We're hopeful to get even more coming up, but we're not quite done here yet. We haven't quite figured out a schedule for another for reach 6 of 7. But certainly we're making some progress here. Digital infrastructure. This goal was, I consider this goal to be sort of a twofold goal because it was asking about both making internet access faster and better for city facilities, but also making internet access faster, better, and cheaper for the citizens. That's kind of a tall order, but actually quite a lot has been done on this. We certainly started 2 years ago having a lot of conversations with the private sector, with internet service providers, different companies, different business leaders about what's going on with our internet access. What's expensive, what's not, what's affordable, where can we get this service versus that service, and we came up with some good information. Among other things, we talked to the state about their statewide broadband plan. We got a lot of information in place. Certainly, we're not the only player in this game. There are other people who are working towards getting internet out by the private sector or other government entities. Certainly, the good news here is that, first of all, the state is doing a lot of work itself. They've funded a project with Visionary Communications to give more internet connectivity to the school district. So the schools are getting wired, and the side effect, not just protecting the schools, but it also allows as those cables get run through the streets, citizens and business entities in those areas, they get access. And certainly the private businesses like to have utility customers. They want customers to sign on, and so that's very high-speed internet access becomes available to people who live in those places. Certainly, there's Visionary Communications that, and certainly we also know that Blue Peak has entered the market as a new vendor, in addition to some of the more historical vendors like CenturyLink and Spectrum. But also on top of that, the council about a month ago signed a contract with Northwest Technologies to do something very similar to what is going on with the school district, wiring up 12 of our city facilities with high-speed fiber optic cable so that we can connect our facilities permanently. But the another side effect of that, again, is that our facilities are all over the place. This includes our 5 fire stations, which are all around the city. It includes their golf course, which is forward to the south. It includes solid waste, which is all the way to the north. It covers a lot of ground. That means there's a lot of cable going through a lot of different parts of the city, and so there's a lot of people who can tie into these things. And so hopefully that, again, more fiber optic cable on the street means more competition for the customers, more options for them to have the kind of internet access that they're looking. So we seem to be making some really good progress here. And of course, Mountain West has just started on this, but we're hopeful that this will be in place in a year, 2 years. So, thank you. Infrastructure, facilities, recreation facilities and programs. Certainly, Ms. Lopez has been presenting to you quite a lot lately on this specific topic. This is all about taking apart all of our subsidized recreation facilities and trying to find ways to generate more revenue and or cut costs to minimize the subsidy. Certainly, you guys have already been talking about that even earlier this evening. That's been a long process. It's taken a lot of research, lots of brainstorming on the level of staff. The good news, of course, is that a lot of ideas have come forward, and a lot of those ideas seem to be very, very promising. Lots of, especially issues dealing with what I'll call non-traditional sources of revenue, be it naming rights, be it marketing, be it enhanced revenue from sales of concessions and material items of different kinds. There's a lot of ways that we could maybe maximize some revenue in those ways, as well as maybe sometimes looking at our rates. I'm not going to leave that off the list. That has certainly been proposed. But many different ways to raise the revenue as a way to help minimize some of these subsidies. We do have this one as listed in progress. Oh, by the way, there's more presentations coming up. Forgot to mention that. So you're not done yet. But aside from the presentations, we are hoping to memorialize these as a formal document that you guys can sign off on, some sort of rate resolution that will establish this is how we're going to do things as far as maintaining our revenue. And so we're hoping to bring that back to you in the new year as a way to, we'll call it, finalize this goal.
Carter, do you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably one of those areas that I would ask also be included in conversation starting in January for the ongoing council, if you will, incoming council. In that, while we certainly have given you a lot of ideas and will have given you a lot of ideas by the time we meet in January, the 31st, I think is what we're proposing on the grid. We really need to close the loop with respect to what it is that council's willing to do in order to consequently, or I should say substantively, deal with the subsidy issues that we've identified pretty thoroughly to you by now. The thing that is probably the hardest part about all this is the what now question. And that's where the real consequential decisions need to be made. The real challenges will need to be addressed and faced, and will likely generate, unfortunately, a lot of conversation that sometimes may not be easy. So the big ideas that are needed to deal with subsidy issues have yet to be decided upon, honestly. We've certainly touched on a few. We've certainly, given you some insight into what some of those are. But the reality is we need you to tell us yes or no if you're serious about dealing with subsidies. And those consequential ideas are not easily embraced all the time. So my hope is that despite that, we'll still be able to have that conversation and have that dialogue and hopefully make some of those consequential decisions.
You bet.
Moving on. Transit operations. This was the one goal that we added after the fact. For those of you who were here at the time when the goals were adopted, we adopted them in May, but we actually added this one in November the following, because we had just recently brought on the transit system. Transit system for many years has been outsourced to a private entity, but brought operations in-house, and so we wanted to memorialize that by mentioning that yes, transit operations is going to be a new function for the city, a new division really, that would take a lot of effort. We'd have to hire bus drivers, we'd have to hire dispatchers, we have to basically start a whole new operation in Liz Becker's department. And that's a lot of work, and so we had a lot of steps involved as far as getting it up and running. So we did rebrand the buses very soon after, we got the link and the assist. We've gone through it as far as setting up procedures and routes. We've certainly reworked some of the routes. Certainly you had a presentation about a month ago talking about some of those route changes, some of those rebranding changes, some of those new bus stop signs which are now out there in the community. A lot of work has been happening on this. There are some things in particular which we're still sort of dealing with. Certainly the MDTs were something that was specifically on this list. We are still looking to do those MDTs. Those are, mobile data terminals. They're computers in the buses, basically, that allow for more efficient operation. We are still likely to get some of those and ask for your permission to install some. That'll be a capital request for maybe next year or the year after. I'm seeing a nod over here to the right. Some other issues, we just installed some new route software, the TripMaster system. That's something that's giving us some new data, something that we didn't have before, as far as who's getting on, who's getting off, and where. That's the kind of stuff that's helpful as far as keeping the system more efficient and bringing it to the next level. So obviously a lot of work has happened on here. Maybe some finishing up still, but really quite a lot of progress as far as making that system and making it native to the city of Casper. Moving on, business investment. This was a goal about trying to make Casper the premier or the preferred location for businesses among the other within the region. Certainly things that we're working on here, but we haven't declared any of them done yet. So all of them are still listed as in progress. One of the major steps is what kind of business incentives we can offer. Business incentives are kind of a bread and butter thing for many cities across the nation, where you work to recruit major companies, like you want to bring in Boeing or Amazon or Google or whatever, and you often do so by offering them incentives. You offer them tax breaks, you offer them infrastructure enhancements, you offer them all sorts of different kinds of things. And that works in other states, but it doesn't work so well in ours. We've got a constitutional a rule in the Constitution that says that we can only do very limited amounts of support for private entities. We have to work around that. That is something that we have to live with. Now, certainly, our environment is already naturally business friendly. We have very low taxes, among other things. But still, in terms of coming up with business incentives, we're looking for other things that we can do to encourage businesses to grow and develop here in Casper. And so I know that the discussion is still ongoing between community development and the attorney's office as far as exactly what can we do legally in order to provide the kinds of incentives that businesses need and that, of course, are constitutional. Beyond that, there's some cooperative goals. We still think there's more to be done on that, but we've been working with the economic development agencies, especially we've done a lot of work as far as with the tourism group. So we've got the tourism master plan that has been adopted by council, adopted back in May, and that's been a nice cooperative goal between us and the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber and so on, with the idea of bringing in ways to emphasize Casper's benefits as a tourist destination. We think there are others that are like that. The Ivor Lake Casper Alliance has been another way where we've been working cooperatively with the other entities, especially in Dakota County, to keep air service in town. That's the kind of thing where we feel like we're making some progress. We're not quite ready to call it done. We think there might still be some more we can do, but certainly we're making some progress. Last but not least, I wanted to mention the snapshot. We are hoping to start producing a publication once a year that provides information to potential business owners who might be here, that provides them with factual information that's useful, be it statistical information or factual, just facts about what Casper is like, what kind of, what's the weather like, what's the population like, but also, things like, average households and so on. These are the kinds of things that businesses want, and they want it in an easily digestible manner, so that you can just hand it to them, like, here you go. Hopefully presented in a cleverly, nicely designed system. I'll let you publish it, but basically, something that they can just have and that makes them interested in our community as a potential place to grow. And hopefully, employ people.
We got a question real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Thanks, Rick. To that point, I'm inferring that this is the case, but just looking for verification, is that a publication that we are intending to do in-house, or is Advanced Casper gonna take the lead on something like that? I noticed that in here, and I don't remember talking about that before, so I was just intrigued about that publication. It's a good idea. I was just curious who's responsible, who's publishing that.
I appreciate that, Mayor. If it's all right, I would like to defer to a friend of mine.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, Karen, I've been sitting too long, I may be falling. That was identified last time as in-house school, so we will be producing it in-house. We're gonna be using a lot of our business data from the building permit side of it, as well as a lot of the real estate development. And we're also gonna do some testimonials as to businesses that have chosen to locate here and why. So that's what we're looking at annually.
Thank you. Follow up if I could. There may have been a reason why you didn't include it in the list, but I felt like the Film Casper initiative kind of fit in this in the sense that, it's not incentives necessarily, but streamlining the permitting process so that, our environment's a little bit friendlier to folks that are doing expedient type productions.
And I agree. I know that was it went to the state legislature. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't support it in that first year, but maybe they will in the future. And at least we've got the infrastructure in place now. We've got the administrative agreements. We've got a system in place so that we can help if filming projects want to come to town. And so yeah.
Did you have something?
Yeah, you might want to check with Advanced Casper because they are doing that magazine. They have an online component and the magazine, which sounds like it's covering a lot of the same things.
That's what they brought to us.
More the better.
But then you've got two magazines saying the same thing, so why would you have two and spend the money?
Not everybody gets both magazines.
Follow up, I guess my interpretation of the publication is more of a one sheet, or are we actually planning on like a, magazine or something? Just more of a one sheet kind of takeaway?
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
Moving on, citizen engagement. this was the third goal of the three, and about engaging with the citizens at a higher, deeper, and better level as we go on. So we divided this up into two different areas, one being citizen engagement methods, the other being citizen engagement technology. So as far as methods, as you are all well aware, we have recently hired 2 additional staff within the city manager's office. One being a communications and marketing generalist, the other being a graphic designer who can help us be more professional about the kinds of publications that we do, the kinds of interactions we go out and do, and to have some other private sector experience to make us a bit more effective. They've been in our office now for, since April and since August, I suppose. And I do think they've become much more engaged in many of the things that we've been doing. You've probably been aware that, of course, one of our examples is the pooch party. It was a simple event. We ran it over the summer to invite all the dogs in town to come and swim in the pool. We sold out in 2 hours. That's kind of unusual for us, and we'd like to think that some of that was enhanced marketing, where we're a little bit clever about how we get the word out. It creates a bit more excitement and a bit more people come. Another example is the Washington Park process, which is going on right now. We've been doing public outreach about that, and we've gotten a lot of participation at the public meetings, which frankly, public meetings are often not that exciting, and yet people came to both sets of public meetings. We also had an online survey, and we're astonished we had 422 responses. That's a lot. For a voluntary survey that we run online, people are interested, people are hearing about these things, and we'd like to think that some of that is because we're being a bit more sophisticated and a bit more engaging with how we're reaching out to the public. And so that seems to be moving in the right direction. We definitely want to use that staff to start setting a new standard for how we go about communicating, both in terms of those professionals individually, as far as being involved in more projects, but also just generally sort of setting a higher standard and setting up with standard ways of doing public outreach and trying to make us more familiar as an organization. Public outreach in the city of Casper has always been rather decentralized, and it'll probably always be rather decentralized. We've got too many departments doing too many different things. But certainly if we have that level of expertise available to us, maybe it can filter through and have nice positive effects everywhere.
Bruce, 311 would fit right in there also, wouldn't it? Because that's launched since I've been on council, and that's one of our engagement methods, I believe, are probably one of our greatest ones.
I would certainly agree with you that the 311 system has been a way for people to, again, to have a two-way conversation with us. It is the traditional problem with cities is that we reach out to them by talking to news media, by broadcasting in various different ways, but it's a lot harder for us to systematically hear from the public. And so 311 is one way we're going to say, yes, this is what's going on. The problem here reports to us electronically, instantaneously, and also very specifically about what's going on and where. That's another way to have a two-way conversation. And so it's one of the reasons why we are trying to roll it out to additional areas. Last but not least, citizen engagement and technology.
Oh, there it is.
Also an ongoing issue. This is something where, yes, we got an Unsafe again, but beyond that, we are trying to look at different ways of doing our outreach. We've got a huge variety of Facebook pages, and MySpace. We used to have MySpace, but Facebook pages.
Did you say MySpace? Oh my gosh.
Hey, it could make a comeback.
I'm showing my age.
Everything's changing.
Do we have OnlyFans?
Should be ready.
I meant to say Instagram, sorry. Anyway, we've got social media accounts that the kids these days are using for their chit chat and their online hit things. Suffice it to say, and again, just as I mentioned with the decentralized, this is another example where we're very decentralized. We've got, our most popular Facebook pages in the police department, where a lot of activity going on there, but also other pages as well and other systems of reaching out. We want to maximize the use of all that social media and online media of different kinds, but we want to pull it into focus in different ways. Now, certainly we are already in the process of revamping the website itself, and that's always going to be of central importance for our online presence. I believe there are some meetings going on even next week to get that up and running. But in addition to that, we've looked into other technologies. Some larger organizations have taken on social media monitoring software, which are ways of automatically monitoring multiple strings of communication. We're not quite sure that that's the right tool for us. We're still looking at it. It's rather expensive given our size. We as an organization of 530 full-time employees, maybe-ish, 530-ish full-time employees. We fall into an odd size category where pricing tends to get higher for an organization of our size, and maybe not, but with a population of 60,000 people and the number of social media accounts we have, it might not be the right solution for us. So I don't want to say we may yet propose it for a capital project next year, depending on what kind of things we hear from the private sector. But that's the kind of thing where we are looking to move in that direction. Other things we've been doing, social media archiving, that's another issue that we of course have to deal with legally. We are a government, and so things that happen online, it's on a Facebook page, MySpace page, we have to archive it, we have to keep a track of it as a public comment. And so we've brought on search technology to help us do that. So we just turned it on a couple weeks ago. So again, trying to stay on top of different kinds of technology when it comes to citizen engagement, different kinds of conversation. So yes, expect we may yet be coming back to you with a request for a little bit more money to help us build out those systems. That being said, this is us looking back. We mentioned the 98 goals. Well, if you take all these numbers and you multiply it out, you get to 98. Trust me. And this is a sense for where we're at, which is where we believe that we have made progress. The green is good. The blue is bad. The blue is okay, and the red is well, we'll get there. I suppose I do want to emphasize that we really do think that council goals are important. Council goals do provide us a lot of clarity as far as what you guys want, and it gives us something to talk about, something to focus on at the staff level to say, look, we are moving in this direction. These are the goals, these are the things we're moving towards. And so on an ongoing basis, this is something that drives the conversation. So
I would just first, before we kind of open it up, I just want to say kudos and congratulations and recognition to the city staff across the board for their hard work in getting a lot of this accomplished. I mean, I was just commenting to Carter that we did a lot. We sat up here. You guys did a lot. And so I think you guys need to be recognized for all the hard work that you guys did this last year, and that's amazing. So I think you guys should be recognized for that. Kyle?
Thanks for saying that, Ray. I was gonna say something similar. I've been really impressed with some of the ground that we've made, especially these last couple points. Thank you for the organization of all of this data. It was very easy to read, put everything into context. I found the progress report super helpful. So thank you for the presentation, for all the information. And then, yeah, to piggyback on what Ray said, I'm happy with the progress we're making in some of those areas. You mentioned the 2 positions we brought on. I was at that public forum for Washington Park, was really happy with the turnout. I saw Chris, it looked like he was working at the Holiday Square lighting over the weekend. 33 social media accounts is City of Casper. No MySpaces, but certainly run the gamut. I was surprised with how many. That makes it tough to wrangle. That's a lot of accounts. But I do think the city is making good ground. I know we're even responsive in comment threads under City of Casper postings and stuff, so I'm super happy to see that dialogue, that back and forth. I think other folks, the city, the police department you mentioned does a great job. Dane Anderson over at Fire EMS does a great job, I think, so I'm happy. Obviously want to see that continue, but I do think it's noticeably different this past year compared to the year prior. So. Kudos, yes.
Amber.
Thank you. I'm obsessed with this. This was very fun to listen to and just kind of have a recap of what all of the conversations and the day-to-day work has resulted in. I have a request before we go through our goal-setting process next year. I think it'd be really helpful to me if we could hear from department heads about where you think we can build on what we've already done, so that we can take that into account when we go to set goals, so that we didn't, we have all of this and that's great, and then we're like, cool, now right turn and head this direction for the next 2 years. It would be, I think, really helpful to me to just hear like, okay, as you've worked on these really specific goals over the last 2 years, what do you see as next steps? What do you think, we're missing? And maybe what has materialized as you've gone through this that wasn't part of an existing goal, but maybe should be part of phase 2 of, if we want to think of it as this goal rather than us starting from scratch with a brand new list.
That's a great idea.
So that would be super helpful to me to have as an item for consideration while we deliberate on next year's goals.
Is council okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you all. This is
We should make the
really great.
department heads get up in front of us too.
Yeah, oral presentation, interpretive
Absolutely.
dance, whatever best conveys the message, I think is fine.
Our presentation. Pete, thank you so much for
Yes, very much.
riveting.
I loved it.
Mm.
Yeah, it was
That was
awesome.
good. Riveting. Yeah, it was great.
Mm.
Did you ever do Napster? you know you're never gonna get there.
Ego by the time I got into it.
Oh. So he's not gonna admit to
I just
anything.
heard MySpace, and after you said that, I'm like, Napster just popped.
All I could think of was Kyle and the OnlyFans comment way back when. I'm like,
that's
wait
right.
a minute, what?
We all had to be educated on
Oh,
that.
yeah. That's just that younger generation. I mean, it's,
Agenda review. Carter, what do you got for us?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have your grid document hopefully accessible to you and in front of you. We are winding down our year, as you can tell. We've got the month of December basically left for our work together. The December 13th work session is going to be a real critical conversation for us as we end up the year and end up hopefully a number of conversations and projects that we've been working on for some time.
I'm sorry, which one did you say?
December 13th.
13th, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that has the potential to be a rather late meeting, particularly if there is some extended discussion on some of these items, and so we may want to consider some fuel for you that evening, given the weight of some of these topics.
By all means.
Michael, I just got to bring more cookies.
You read me very well, Mr. Mayor. That was perfect.
Could would council be okay with, we had some dinner that night brought in for us if it's gonna be late?
Yep. Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Or snacks, whatever.
You bet. The 20th of December, we're anticipating for a follow-up to the safe rooms discussion in fire stations, but we also have a part 2, if you will, scheduled for the December 6th pre-meeting as it relates to the 1 cent community project application and process therein. So be aware that those 2 requested topics are also on your docket, as it were, before the end of the year. And then beyond that, we're into the new year, we're seeing our new council and so forth. However, I would say, before we get too far afoot of some topics that may need to be covered, please refer to your back page entitled Future Agenda Items so that you can be aware of what's on our horizon. So that in fact, if we're missing something, we can fill in those blanks and get those included on our cycle here. So
Sir,
beyond that, that's all I have.
we do need to add the 1 cent discussion for next fall, because I noticed we had some summer stuff on there, so I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything on agenda review? Anything they want to add to the grid for future discussions? Okay. Legislative review, I know we're heading into the new session coming up here in January. Carter, do we have anything we need to discuss?
You know, one of the things, Mr. Mayor, that the council will want to consider is doing a legislative dinner. We generally will have the opportunity to sit down with the state legislature, or at least our representatives thereof, and go through legislative priorities for this group as they go down to Cheyenne and so forth. I would anticipate, unless council would direct otherwise, that we would move in that direction and see if we can't have that audience to go through a couple of your priorities.
Yeah, Amber.
I would like to do that, and I'm curious if we have the legislative priorities developed at this point, or they're mostly the same as last year, since many of those are still, were yet to be heard or passed, or is that still in the works?
Mr. Mayor, council member, the actual answer is yes to all that. I would suggest that there probably are some that would need to continue, but I would also say that that would be a work session we need to have with the new council as well, to make sure we're not missing anything, so that we can be, well equipped to have that dinner conversation, if you will, for the new year.
Is council okay with staff starting to move forward with scheduling and putting that, not only our legislative goals, but also having dinner, our legislative dinner? Okay.
Speaking of dinner, wasn't it last year around the holidays that we did, that we had the employees?
That's a breakfast, I think we do, don't we?
Are we still doing that, or? I haven't seen anything on it. I'm looking at you because you made us wear that stupid deer horn, so I'm looking at you, Liz.
Yes, you did well.
That's what I'm asking.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, that's December 14th, that morning. And we would say be there at what time?
6 a.m.
6?
So that's the morning right after our work session on the 13th.
Yes, sir.
It's gonna go till midnight and then we'll turn around.
I don't do mornings well anyway, so I may miss it.
We'll have breakfast for you.
But you guys will get word out to us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. Okay, council around the table. Keneen, I'll start with you.
Nothing, thank you.
Kyle?
Thanks, Ray. Just a couple things. Small Business Saturday this weekend. I know Fort Casper is participating. I believe the Historic Trail Center is. Not really a city facility, but I was up there today, so on my mind. So just, local, certainly just local businesses, but also, there's some city facilities that are participating in that as well. So just maybe keep those in mind as you're doing your holiday shopping. A lot of folks this season interested in helping David Street, so I think today is the last day for their Lights of Honor fundraiser. If you have a loved one that's passed away, I think it's $20 to dedicate a light at the community Christmas tree, and they'll read the name aloud. So it's a good way to raise some money for David Street. And then just the Christmas parade is this weekend, so I believe the parade starts at 6:30. I think the Christmas tree lighting at David Street is at 6. So I guess plan to, I know some folks missed the tree lighting this last weekend, so just putting it on people's radar. It's coming up, it's the first Saturday after Thanksgiving, so that's all I got.
Is it at 5?
I think it's at 5, Kyle, the tree lighting.
Yeah, I can confirm that. I don't like misinformed.
Oh, thank you, sorry.
I'm gonna miss that one because I'm out of town.
Okay,
I don't think I'm gonna come back for it.
Okay. Yeah, the parade, we're not invited. I don't think we really do anything with the parade, that
Not
parade.
invited.
No, I mean, we're invited, but I mean, we don't have like the county parade where they have a float for us.
We don't have a
I thought everyone was invited, but
Everyone but you can come.
poll anyway.
No, you know what I meant.
Jeez.
Council people.
We're not protected.
No, we're not protected, no. Lisa?
We should end.
Not much, just Thanksgiving's coming up, so hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving with your family and friends.
Amber.
Thank you. Not much to add either. I believe that I saw La Casina's doing a community Thanksgiving meal. There are a number of other places as well. So if you don't have something going on or want an opportunity to get out and enjoy some community meal opportunities, I feel like there's a handful of them. That's the one I remember off the top of my head. I think maybe some Eggington's Thanksgiving food as well. So lots of opportunities for folks who may be looking for that. So take advantage of those and enjoy your week.
Michael.
Everybody put December 17th on your calendar. The McIntosh family's gonna have an open house at their house where everybody just stop by and say hi for 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever you feel like. My wife will make even better desserts than what I make. So, and everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and everybody in the room, please take some cookies with you. I don't need another 20 pounds on my belly. So.
Thanks, Michael. Jai.
Nothing from me other than happy Thanksgiving and safe travels for everybody who's leaving town.
Steve.
I missed it on last Friday, but last Friday we had a swearing-in ceremony, and we swore in 3 new firefighters as part of our city employees, firefighters, to help out from that standpoint. They will be doing their training, riding as the fourth hand on several of the shifts. So that's kind of their training process there. Went to a tour of the historic trails today. I think most of us went sometime the last couple of days. Something that we need to remember is not only on the 17th for the open house at your place, but that is also Wreaths Across America, which they will be laying wreaths on all of the veteran cemeteries here in town. And that will be starting off out at Oregon Trail that morning.
10 a.m.
10 a.m. And if you want a seat inside, you better be there about 8:30.
It's pretty crowded. Carl.
Thanks, Ray. Christmas tree lighting at 6 p.m. at David Street. Christmas parade starts at 6:30.
Thank you.
And then Amber brought it up, Eggington's, it was an anonymous donation, so I don't know exactly who to thank, but somebody bought 1,000 meals through Eggington's for families for Thanksgiving, so whoever that was, mad props to you, super cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
That's what's great about our community. I'm extremely humbled by your vote of confidence in me, as I will serve Mayor well, and I appreciate it very much. With that said, the public should know that there were several other far greater candidates than I that were nominated who chose not to. It's very time consuming and it can be very taxing. And so thank all of you that considered it, ran, everything. I appreciate it. And Ray will be staying on with me, so that'll be good. So things will just stay the way they are and we'll just keep humming along. But thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And that's all I got.
Just a couple things for me. I went to the lighting of the Healing Park. It was packed. There were a lot of people. Ran out of cookies and chocolate.
Should have called Michael.
Yeah, it was great. A lot of kids.
Next year.
Yeah.
Start cooking now.
Santa and Mrs. Claus were there, and they were fantastic. They pushed the button to light it, and I gave just real quick remarks about it, and so it was just really nice to see all that. It was chilly, but it was great. Props to the Parks and Rec Department for the work that they do putting those lights up. It takes them a week, right? They do all week, is it longer than that?
It's gorgeous too.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job of doing that. So thank you, appreciate it. One of the things that I don't talk a lot about, just because I don't do it I do it, is I've been honored to be able to swear in police officers. And I probably am not going to have another one as mayor. And so it's been an honor to do that and being able to swear in police officers and take that moment with families and all the police officers that come up and you know, deputy chief and the chief are usually there supporting them. And so it's been an honor, and I got to do that on Monday. It's usually probably my last one for the year, and it's been an honor to do those things and to work with families. We got a lot of people coming out of state that are coming here and supporting us, and so anyway, just wanted to that was been a real honor to be able to do that this past year. And so, and thanks to you guys and all the work that you guys do too. Appreciate it. Yep. Thank you. That's all I got.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just one item. Thank you for hosting an open house. That sounds like a really fun time. I would just ask everyone to not discuss city business. The Open Meetings Act would then require us to publish and have somebody there taking minutes, and that would ruin the entire atmosphere.
Yes.
So please, golf, hunting, fun things, city business, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And no meeting next Tuesday?
No meeting next Tuesday, so if you don't get a packet, don't worry about it. That's happened to me before, where I go, where's the packet at? And I'll text Fleur, she goes, there's not a council meeting. So that happened. Kyle texted me, go, I missed something here? So, but I hope everybody has a wonderful and healthy and wonderful Thanksgiving with your families and loved ones. So you deserve it. So.
Andrew wins Socks of the Year too, by the way. I want a pair of those for Christmas.
Oh, the price is right. You can have
I love them. Or I could take them
home today.
Maybe I'll leave them on. Or I could just take them off. I think I could try.
Safe travel for anybody traveling. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Come up.